stop offending China and let's have more military cooperation with it. Joining me is the panel, Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching and Liberal Senator James Paterson has completely thrown this perfectly good introduction to something, a very serious topic, by wearing the Tigers clobber ahead of the grand final. Go the Tigers, mate. Thank you for that. I mean, as a fellow Tigers fan.
I thought if there was any program I'd be safe to wear it on, it would be yours.
Yours. Welcome, welcome.
We have to go for a Melbourne team. So normally I would be barracking for Essendon.
Yeah, well, poor old Essendon. But I'm a bit disappointed you didn't bring one for me to also wear. But anyway. Well, from that awkward segue, China, we've got to put our serious faces on. What did you make of this opening up of a policy difference on China? The Prime Minister is accused of aggravating China by saying, hey, listen, it's a big boy, should pull its weight in America.
So the Prime Minister gives a very measured, sensible speech in Chicago with some self-evident truths about China in it, among other observations about trade reform and the World Trade Organisation. And what I thought was most telling about Anthony Albanese's response today is that he had virtually no substantive criticism in return. He didn't really take issue with anything that Prime Minister said in substance, but said, oh, well, he's making this speech from America and some other kind of irrelevant side points. What's interesting about that, Andrew, is it appears that Albanese wants to make a partisan difference out of our complex relationship with China. And that's very dangerous and very irresponsible. And it comes off the back of Richard Marles giving what appears to be a strange speech in Beijing, where he again appears to be trying to outflank the government on being more pro-Beijing or being more pro-China. It seems that the opposition is positioning for a political attack on the government on this issue.
Kimberley.
Normally, foreign policy, trade policy and defence have bipartisan concord, shall we say. The Prime Minister, as we know, is a Prime Minister in terms of foreign policy with training wheels still on, which we saw at the G7, when he was at the G7.
No, leave aside the training wheels. I didn't see anything in the policy, the speech he said, that was bad.
I think if you knew...
So why you say you got a bipartisan, why not bipartisan?
If he knew about trade policy and the complexity around the World Trade Organisation, its rules and its policies, these are very complex and very detailed areas.
No, but can I bring you,
Prime Minister
can I ask you to address?
Cannot unilaterally address the World Trade Organisations and its rules and its policies. It is.
But can I ask you to address the substance of what he was saying, of the criticism that your leader was saying, was that you shouldn't say these things, that China is now a newly developed country and so should pull its weight. You shouldn't say those things in America. So where should we say them?
Remember, Andrew, we've just had a sitting fortnight where the Prime Minister and senior ministers have not wanted to go near China because of Gladys Liu. So he waits till...
got that.
He waits till he gets offshore.
I was tougher than you are on that one. I'm just asking you to address what is the problem...
I'm not sure you've seen my Twitter then.
We'll do an arm wrestle later. But what is the problem with him saying, perfectly sensibly, China's got to pull its weight, but saying it in America? What is the issue? In America, you should say the opposite?
Because, it comes back to my initial point, which is these tend to be bipartisan...
then all you need to do is agree with him.
Approaches. Well, no, because normally what happens is that there is conversation that happens between the parties that are able to form government. And as we have seen from, let's take the ANZUS alliance, from 1941, when John Curtin first made a speech saying we turn to America, it was formalised in 51.
Oh, but this is a history bypass. Come on.
What the Prime Minister said in Chicago was it very closely matched what he said in June in Australia on a very substantial and similar issue. It's just an extension of that philosophy, which he's sharing with the Australian public, as he should. If the Labor Party had a substantive policy disagreement, then fair enough. They're entitled to make that, even on a matter of foreign policy. But I don't understand what their substantive difference is, what their disagreement is here. Kimberley hasn't articulated it.
Well, I think that what we've seen is we know that China, there are many complexities around China, and firstly, internally, domestically within China. And having, because we know on the East Coast...
I still don't get to what he's done wrong,
on the East Coast of China, there's a different standard of living to that which is, lived in Western
look, you make a point, but the point here, surely, James, is if China's so poor that it needs help on trade laws, it needs a payout from the UN's a climate fund of $100 billion a year that we stupidly chip into as well. If it's so poor that it needs this handout, why is it firing rockets into space, developing nuclear weapons and running the world's second biggest, most powerful army?
Andrew, I think China's economic development is one of the most unambiguously positive things to happen in the 21st century. They've lifted more than 600 million people out of poverty. That's a great thing, but I think we all recognise that China today is not what China was in the 1970s and 1980s. It is on par with the Western world in terms of its wealth and its influence, and it doesn't clearly need an unfair advantage over its competitors anymore.
Only the eastern coast. I mean, Shanghai, I agree, is one of the world's most modern cities.
Indistinguishable from a Western city in wealth.
Western China, there are a whole lot of towns and villages that really the only built-form buildings will be the local town administration building, health clinic and a school.
That's a matter for China. That really is a matter for them internally to reconcile, not for Australia to do on their behalf.
But we know that there is a complexity in a country as large as that, as we recognise in India as well.
Exactly. There's lots of other countries that have that diversity, and we don't treat them differently because some regions are underdeveloped.
And again, why couldn't he spend 2 weeks of the sitting weeks talking about
well, look, the point is, I think there's the argument that he shouldn't have said in America is basically a bit silly, and that it's going to offend China. I mean, if China's the kind of country that takes offence about where you say something and changes its trade rules as a consequence, then it really is a big menace. The Ben Roberts-Smith stuff, are you comfortable with the way the media is going with him?
I think that the Inspector General of the ADF and the AFP are doing investigations. I think these are allegations. I thought Andrew Hastie's points on 60 Minutes that he made, that sometimes, that sometimes it's the strategy of why we're there sometimes becomes lost. I thought that they were very mature and well-argued points that Andrew Hastie made on that program.
That's the Liberal MP who's been an SAS soldier serving there, and he was saying, sometimes you get caught up in the thing, you've got to get a target, you've got to get kills, and maybe you lift your eye on the gate. But the point is here, I agree, these should be investigated secretly, but the public smearing of Ben Roberts-Smith, whether he's guilty or innocent, we don't know, but the public thing does concern me, and the fact that this investigation, the Armed Forces one, has taken 3.5 years nearly.
Look, I think Andrew Hastie's comments went to the heart of this issue, which is we should respect and protect the independence of this investigation process, and I think it's vitally important that we do this. I'm a supporter of Australia projecting its influence into the world and taking a strong active stance in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere. But when we do so, it's crucial that we do it in an ethical way and in a legal way. And I don't think anyone can say that Andrew Hastie is anti-SAS or anti-Australian Defence Forces. But a lot of people on both sides of this public discussion have prejudged the outcome of this, and Andrew was saying, let it run its course, let it come to its conclusions and respect those. Don't try and front-run that by either running protection for people who are accused.
But it's the media coverage, mate. It's the media coverage that concerns me.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm saying the commentary about it has been unhelpful on both sides. You've had people prejudging it in both respects, saying that either that he's guilty or that he's innocent.
Yeah, but usually the innocent claims come when after someone's publicly accused of being guilty. The whole thing is, I just think the man's reputation is being smeared, and the investigators got to get off their backside, either, what's the expression, piss or get off the pot. 3.5 years is too long.
I know that sounds like a very long time, Andrew, but I imagine that these kind of investigations in the hills of Afghanistan are not easy to conduct, and they do take time.
But the poor bugger is, meanwhile, the process is the punishment.
But I'd much
Do you
rather
want to be accused for 3.5 years and,
But would you prefer that they truncated the process and did it too quickly?
Yes.
And didn't do it? Well, I wouldn't. I think it's probably got to follow the
When it's gone public and when it's being exploited by Russia, and when we're advertising in Afghanistan that our guys are on trial,
I don't think we're doing anyone any favours if we truncate these things.
I don't think we're doing ourselves any favours at the moment.
Without actually following the process through properly. I wouldn't want the result that it finds to be subject to criticism because it was hastened too quickly.
I also don't like Australia trashing people's reputation over 3.5 years with an investigation that's going on too long. Kimberley, Greta Thunberg's address to at the United Nations, trembling, crying, saying, her life's destroyed. I mean, gee, did that make you worry at all?
I think that since time immemorial...
You've got that face on you when you think, oh, my goodness, I'm walking a tightrope here. I know what I want to say.
Since time immemorial, young people have been annoying their elders. And not that I'm necessarily suggesting that Greta Thunberg has been annoying people, but I think that has been the case. And I think, I'd rather... young people are more idealistic. They tend to be less conservative. I think
that's not idealistic. She's actually anti-idealistic. She's got no future. That's not ideal.
We all come to an understanding, I think, of our society and civil society in different ways. And I think
she went out there and now you're...
I think she's...
What do you think?
Andrew,
see if you can do better than that.
Andrew, I don't want to criticise a young person.
Oh, for heaven's sake, we've got two politicians in here.
Hear me out, Andrew. I don't want to criticise a young person who's evidently very passionate about her cause, but I'm also not going to take public policy advice from a 16-year-old either. The kind of claims we've seen at the Students' Climate Strike on Friday are utterly delusional, and even the most extreme predictions within the mainstream climate science, if we accept those, the world is not coming to an end in 2030 or 2050. This kind of apocalyptic rhetoric is actually really dangerous and harmful, and no wonder there are all these young people with serious anxiety issues about climate change. So what they have been fed, I think, is very irresponsible, and it's causing real distress to young people.
Yeah, but why don't we get more scientists having the guts to stand up and say this is not right?
I think when you've got people saying they're not going to have children as a result of climate change, the burden does fall on scientists to correct that.
You had the Age newspaper.
So
you had the Age newspaper on the weekend seriously reporting 3 women saying we're not going to have any children because the world's going to end. It's terrible, terrible. I mean, you've got to be grateful for the Darwinian theory. At least they won't breed. Kimberley Kitching, I shouldn't have said that, should I? James Paterson, thank you both so much for your time. More after the break.